Why do you support Donald Trump?
Yeah, I think like the crux of my rationale. I mean, I can go the abortion route if you'd like, or I can go I guess, the nuclear deterrence route. Either of them, I think, would be a fun discussion if you're down.
Sure. Which would you think is your strongest?
Dude, honestly, whichever one you're, I don't want to sort of like make it a back and forth, but I'm down for either, whichever one you like more.
Okay. So you say a nuclear deterrence. How do you feel about him pulling out of the nuclear agreement that we had with Iran?
So firstly, I think that my position is mostly retrospective in terms of, I guess, what the best decision had seemed to have been back then. I think that the nuclear deterrence argument, as it relates to pulling out, um, really doesn't lose its strength because even though we had pulled out, or even though we might sort of be in a position where on paper we are, I guess, less, cooperative in that sense, we still ultimately, I guess, like, get to preserve the benefit of Trump in office to deter nuclear war, which I can go into the reasons for, without the disadvantage of losing a potential advantage or potential readiness should someone try to circumvent that policy.
Okay, I'm just asking, what specific thing does Donald Trump do to reduce the likelihood of nuclear war?
Yeah, so psychologically, his posture creates a sort of presence that makes it so that he's like threatening to go up against because he's not very easy to read, and that's just like a very simplified, bastardized version of it, but really it's true. And that I guess the implication of that is individuals who are used to being able to get their way with other countries due to being able to leverage rationality or the threat of destroying their country's people aren't able to leverage that threat anymore because they really don't know whether or not Trump is bluffing. And I think that we've seen that historically. North Korea is obviously I guess a distant expression, but I think that the best way to think about it is China and Russia sort of having a more I guess
No, I'm saying what
agreeable.
he did this.
Yeah,
He did this with North Korea. What did we get from that?
I guess a de-escalation.
Nope. They continued firing.
Essentially, the U.S. and China and the U.S. and Russia, like in particular, were threats on a nuclear level, which is exacerbated by a couple of other things. Essentially, it's like we had a much higher than normal threat of nuclear war in 2024, and so in order to have our essentially like our emergency mode on, Trump was the better choice given his strange but effective relationship with the other party's leaders.
There was nothing about the relationship that you can point to that would mean that like he would reduce the likelihood of nuclear conflict.
Yeah, yeah,
If anything, we can
absolutely.
point to the fact that he gave Putin more power by defunding Ukraine, which put them into a position where it is the case that they were more likely to take over Ukraine, which is what happened. Again, if we continued the funding specifically to Ukraine, it would have been a better defense against Russia. I don't understand what they would have got out of us to a greater extent under a democratic administration that you're so scared of.
Yeah, so I think that whenever we're in a position where miscalculation of nuclear, I guess, firing, right, is a threat, which had been heightened at the time of 2024 when lethal autonomous weapons started integrating artificial intelligence and essentially just our systems as a whole became a lot more threatening and a lot less predictable. The slight
Not
edge that
not
Trump
not in
has
terms of nukes.
psychologically.
Not in terms of nukes, because nukes, again, both sides have nukes. There's likely not to be anything dropped because of mutually assured destruction. So mutually assured destruction, regardless of the implementation of AI, won't have any effect on it.
Well, I would agree, except that with miscalculation specifically as the internal link to that threat, miscalculation presumes that you are under attack, right? So with lethal autonomous weapons integration of AI, there might be a misread that's exacerbated beyond what humans would will be likely to misread, and it's a lot. I guess in the offensive realist theory, right? It's a lot more likely that we would be under
When
attack.
would nukes be dropped on a country that has nukes? When would that be a miscalculated thing?
Or I guess I forgot exactly what the decade was, but Russia actually had miscalculated and thought that the United States was attacking it, and subsequently was in initiation a
How many
strike back.
decades ago was this?
This was in the late 1900s, I think
Yeah,
1980s,
so this
19.
has nothing to do with AI.
Oh yeah, no. Well, I'm saying AI makes it actually even worse, right? But the reason why that was stopped, right, is because a human had essentially pulled the emergency no button as a guess, right? He didn't really know that this was not the case. We weren't under attack, but essentially the argument I'm making is it's more realistic than casually we make it out to be. And we were in a much worse position given that like AI essentially
Okay.
has the read and has the
There's.
initial
Okay.
thing.
So, do you think deregulating AI would increase or decrease the likelihood of there being nuclear conflict?
I think that well, firstly, Trump and Xi Jinping had an agreement that Trump actually initiated to completely, I guess, eliminate the utilization of AI in the decision-making process, right? So the deregulation of AI is independent of nuclear control, right? Because regulation with regard to corporate entities doesn't have the same effect on nuclear outcomes, right? So that's just my thought there, I guess.
So you're saying that regardless of who's in president, we're not going to have any type of influence of AI over our nuclear program. Yet you were arguing originally that AI having an influence over our nuclear program will lead to an increase in nuclear war. If it's
Wait.
not
So
there,
what do
then
you mean
I'm
by
confused what your
regardless of
point
the
is.
president?
You just said specifically that it is the case that we had that regardless,
We
right?
we I'm sorry, sir. What is your point? We had what regardless? Or are you saying the I guess agreement that Trump brokered?
No, we would have an agreement that it is the case that we would have no AI involvement specifically through the context of the nuclear weapons.
Yeah. So that had I guess been a consequence of the discussions
What
that
year did
occurred
that happen?
subsequent. I think it was this year, if not last year, but it was subsequent
If it
to
was
the.
last year, then that was under
Or,
Biden.
pardon me, sorry. I meant earlier this year, if not this quarter. But yeah, it was subsequent to like the I guess verbal negotiation and discussion of de-escalation like that took place between Trump and Xi Jinping, and a couple of months subsequent, that's whenever the I guess the rush to de-escalate was occurred. But I mean, if you think about how the sentiment was on Xi Jinping's side when Biden was in office, like it was pretty ugly, dude. Like,
That's actually Joe Biden that agreed to this.
well, Trump is the one who, I guess implemented and
That's
submitted it.
Biden
Biden
in
wasn't the one who.
November 17, 2024.
Yeah, the thing is, the initiation of the agreement was something that Biden had proposed, but it hadn't gone through. It might have, I guess, been sort of
Wait,
floated,
wait.
but the
Okay,
implement.
so then it's not specific to one party. So what you were trying to portray as it's specific to one party is just irrelevant. I can show you a
I guess
Reuters
the
article
best
right
way,
now that they agreed to this before. This was in November 16th, 2024.
regardless of the agreement. Okay, so I think the best way to think about it, in terms of the way that I'm trying to propose it, is it's less about the nature of the agreement. It's more about the nature of the integration and the nature of the implementation, right? So since the implementation occurred much subsequent to that, right, and since in between the I guess ending of that I guess discussion between Biden and Xi Jinping and the ending of Biden's term, there was actually turmoil. And there was actually I guess before essentially was implemented, essentially going on between Biden and Xi Jinping in a negative manner, right? It was essentially like a shot in the foot that kind of stopped us from being able to implement and wasn't I guess resumed until Trump was able to push it through a couple of months later, right? And of course, I mean Biden, like great job to bro for I guess getting that on the docket, right? But regardless, it's not a question of I guess that as a unique qualifier, but that's just one threat that exacerbated I guess the scenario.
You'd have to provide a unique qualifier for it to be relevant to this conversation. Otherwise, you're not really giving a reason as to why you support Trump over the opposing side. So give me
Yeah,
something
exactly.
specifically that would be relevant in terms of a unique quality that Trump would have that would specifically not be prevalent on the side of Harris. That would mean that in relation to Trump, there are going to be better conditions as it relates to nuclear armament around the world. You have no good evidence of that. Not only did he pull out of the nuclear agreement specifically with Iran, which specifically increased Iran's access to nuclear weapons, but he's also on a world stage engaged in more conflict, giving Russia more power, right? Like, I
Yeah,
don't
so
understand how
I,
you're going to
I would
argue.
say I would argue that the posture with Xi Jinping prior to Trump's ushering in to re-agree and to re-bring it back on the table was something that was really shaky, which is why it was particularly urgent and critical for Trump to win then. Because had Kamala been in office as an individual whose political influence was very limited and political history was a lot more I guess minimal, right, as compared to Trump, and whose I guess dominance with regard to their social relationship, quite literally, was a lot less prominent. So it seems to me that when the threat is so large, that is just one example of many where not just this sort of sub agreement, but the broader nuclear conflict generally was something that was at risk. And even if it's a minimal risk, it's higher than regular and should have been a top priority since it could literally kill
You're
us all.
giving no argument for why Kamala Harris would give a greater risk for there being nuclear conflict.
Xi Jinping's offensive realist advantage would have been to, in facing off with Kamala, use the rationality of Kamala to his
What
benefit.
differently would have occurred if Kamala Harris were in office that would mean that you would think it's worse off in terms of our international conflicts?
Kamala's rationality, right? So Kamala's likelihood of wanting to protect her own nation would have created a leverage point wherein China would have been able to take that and, I guess, derive from that a lot of, quite literally leverage for its own sake, right? He could have been able to,
So China gets leverage from Harris being nominee. That's all I've heard. You're just saying
the difference.
Honestly,
The difference between,
I'm gonna be honest with
Yeah,
you.
sorry,
You're
bro.
kind
Go
of
ahead.
yapping, bro.
Okay, man, I'm sorry to hear that, but the reason essentially what I'm trying to say here is this: Trump has a position in the one-to-one relationship that's different than Kamala's relationship with them.
In what
one-to-one,
way
because
that means that it's better off on behalf of Trump?
the way that is better off for us is when we're faced off against irrational leaders. So let's put China aside. Let's just take North Korea back into the picture, for example. The United States against North Korea is something that, the situation is something Trump can handle better because Trump is very likely to respond in a negative way or to strike first should the de-escalation talks.
So he's more likely
not
to
come
respond in a
quicker.
negative way. In what type of way is he more likely to respond negatively that you think is beneficial?
What I'm saying, when Trump tweets, for example, like, we're going to destroy your country, we're going to do X, we're going to do Y.
So then why doesn't he
obviously
do that with
it's absurd.
Putin? Because
What's that?
he cut funding to Ukraine. Why didn't he do that with Putin?
I mean, like, he does take his, side jabs. Firstly, okay. The reason why he does it in certain contexts and doesn't in others is because he's balancing the question of how the recipient would respond in relation to the situation. So
Yeah, but you
with
just
North
said
Korea,
irrational
it's
leaders
irrational-
such as Putin. You named Putin as one of the examples, right? Therefore, this would be applicable to Putin. And if it's not applicable to Putin, well, then he has some random policy that he doesn't even know what it is. He has concepts of a foreign policy, and that's why he got conned by Putin. That's why Putin has more power in Ukraine. That's why Donald Trump, when he got cut the funding for Ukraine, he realized he f***ed up. He has to put back in the funding because he gave Putin more power in the region.
Yeah, I guess the point I'm making, though, is that with Putin, it's a sliding scale that's different than Kim Jong-un, right? Like, Kim Jong-un's irrationality is more narcissistic, whereas the irrationality of Putin is still, I guess, measured by a diplomatic, strategy. Though it's obviously
There is no diplomatic strategy for either, right? Can you give me some type of relevant distinction?
When I say diplomatic strategy, I mean diplomatic strategy with the U.S. I think we can say that the
What
tension
diplomatic
was a lot-
what diplomatic strategy exists? There is no diplomatic strategy because there is no engagement where they've actually meaningfully got anything.
When Trump went to North Korea,
they've broke the Budapest Memorandum. They broke exchange of prisoners with Ukraine. That's what Zelensky has literally told Donald Trump in the Oval Office, and yet Donald Trump still doesn't acknowledge that.
I'm confused as to what your point is.
I'm saying, why didn't he specifically acknowledge that Putin isn't negotiating, isn't trying to get anything done, which is exactly what just happened. And that's why Putin has gotten more power in the region, because Donald Trump cut funding for Ukraine, which gave Putin more power to take over the region. If that funding was still in place, it would be the case that Putin would be in a worse position for defending Ukraine. They know that they can't economically last against a Ukraine funded by the West. They can't. The West can fund Ukraine longer than Russia would be able to fund the conflict.
Okay, so I think I see where the divergence is here. I have a bit of a more radical position, I think, than what you might have been perceiving my position to be. My, I guess, understanding of what the good or the bad in this situation is what just solely and exclusively maximizes the well-being of the nation, right? So when we're asking ourselves about the leader, right, even if outside parties, have certain outcomes that might be, I guess, net negative in this context, if it is solving an existential threat to the United States and to the individuals of the United States, even though the chance might be, I guess, smaller than the chance of, some sort of a breach outside of the United States, it would still outweigh should the, existential threat be
It
of
affects
its
the United
magnitude.
States because we have agreements with Ukraine to defend them.
The agreement with Ukraine to defend the United States has, well,
No,
first
to
of all,
defend
okay, I guess,
Ukraine. If they gave up their nuclear weapons, we would defend them from Russia invading. That's what the
okay,
agreement says. We
I'll
need to
say this.
uphold the
I think
agreement if we want other countries around the world to develop any similar type of agreement.
I think that Trump's unconstitutional. I think that Trump is a bad guy. I think that Trump has a lot of qualities that have harmed our domestic well-being in many ways. But the reason why I still am having this conversation with you with regard to Trump and with regard to the outcome that I still think has been maximized is because even though he has all these sorts of transgressions that might be negative in all different sorts of ways, even if it's a sort of a like a true ethical transgression on one page, right? Such as I guess not necessarily adhering maximally to saving Ukraine in some end, and whatever it may be, right? The ultimate point for me is that when the nuclear tension between the United States and the other country is higher than it has ever been, if there is any risk of an advantage of Trump having the I guess strong arm that would stop us from getting nuked in a better manner than Kamala would, then we should sit on that and hang our hat there because we can't afford to be wrong. That's the crux of my position.
Yeah, so if your assumption here is that Kamala Harris is putting us at a greater risk, but you have no basis for that at all. If anything, we have better reason to believe that Donald Trump is putting us at a greater risk based upon how he's engaged in conflicts around the world, right? How he's specifically given more power to Putin, how he's literally cut the funding for Ukraine, how he quite frankly
But what is that? Yeah, but what
caused
is
the
that all?
Turkish-Kurdish war because he pulled out of Kurdistan, left our Kurdish allies.
Okay. I mean, look, I mean, the brokering of agreements is something that I don't think is relevant on either of our sides to go back and forth on, right? But what I do think the ultimate point is that when he has done these sorts of things in any capacity, he's at least had like an affirmative reason to prove to, I guess he's affirmatively proved that he is good at stopping, nuclear tension. Whereas Kamala, whether or not you would want to buy, I can introduce negative arguments for sure. I'd be happy to. And
I'm confused. I'm confused how he has been the one to reduce nuclear tension. There's no good
nuclear
evidence
tension specifically.
There's honestly no good evidence that you can point to that Kamala Harris would be worse at reducing nuclear tension. There's no good evidence of that at all. You're just assuming this. Well, You're just assuming this because you feel like it.
I think since the stakes are high, well, I guess I'll explain. There's two reasons, right? One, since the stakes are high, even if there aren't, which there are, reasons for why Kamala would be worse than Trump in this sort of a situation, the best thing we can reliably do is not gamble on a new individual when the stakes are so high. And
because we already know how they're going to act. Okay, so then you would say that we should have voted for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump in 2016.
I guess why? I mean, what's the rationale there? Are you saying that there was an equally credible nuclear threat?
Global tensions were high. Yeah.
Well, I think that the global tensions then, I mean, that's a whole debate to be had. I hadn't really thought about that too deeply. I really don't know what my position would be there. Sincerely, the only reason why I really cared about Trump and cared about voting for Trump in that regard, independent of the abortion argument, which, whether or not you want to...
Would you rather vote for Joe Biden or J.D. Vance?
That's it. I mean, I would have to look at the policies more deeply. I mean, dude, I'm literally a two-issue voter, my guy. Like, one is existential, and then one is just independently ethical.
Yeah,
and I like
that's a horrible thing. Let's see how far you go with that. Would you vote for Donald Trump over Kamala Harris if you were held civilly liable as a woman?
If the nuclear threat was credible and the nuclear threat was something that would have, I guess, everybody in the United States, then I think I still would have voted for Donald Trump.
If Donald Trump
would you not have?
If Donald Trump was convicted, right?
Bro, I mean, like, would you not have? If you were convicted,
there's no nuclear threat. I don't know why you keep imposing this particular nuclear threat given to a greater degree under Kamala Harris. It's actually frustrating that you're assuming that to be true. Like, it's like factually based.
What's factually based, bro?
You're acting like it's factually based that Kamala Harris puts us at a greater risk of nuclear threat. Now, can I please keep asking my question?
I guess go ahead, but yeah, sure, man, sure. We can leave that point to the side. Go ahead.
If Donald Trump was convicted, right, of children and them with Jeffrey Epstein, would you still vote for him?
In no instance would I continue to vote for him, other than the instance where I would say it will be the highest likelihood of saving everybody in the United States should I believe there's a credible threat, which means since you and I disagree on whether or not there was a credible nuclear threat, I'm not trying to, assert it. I'd be happy to like discuss why, independent of the AI integration argument and the miscalculation risks, it was more likely than ever for a nuclear war to create itself, through new circumstances that we haven't foreseen. I still would, I guess, other than that, other than the sort of realism of that situation, never, ever want to vote for somebody who had ever done any sort of a thing, since it's obviously not outweighed.
So can you give me an answer?
I mean, the answer is if everybody does, if I don't, then yeah, I'll vote for him.
So you would vote for Donald Trump even if you were convicted, right, of
If
children
Donald Trump,
and you'd still vote for him over Kamala Harris.
Okay. You and I have a different view of the nuclear situation. I know you think that mine is radical, but take yourself in my shoes and tell me,
You're
if
trying
you
to
had
make
the
the
same
conversation.
level
You're
of
trying to make the conversation about
Dude,
something
no.
different, so that you
I'm
don't
saying-
have
I'm
to
saying-
directly answer
no,
the question.
No, I answered it directly, bro. I said, if you have the same level of belief as me,
No
in the
ifs, no
likelihood of
ifs. It's a
nuclear
yes
war-
or no question.
Hold on. I mean, dude.
You can
gave me a
answer
hypothetical.
answer yes or no, and then explain after. I would love to hear that.
Okay. I answered, given my posture on the nuclear threat, it seems to have been the outweighing decision in the circumstances that I guess occurred.
So would
That
you?
occurred. And also,
Would
this is
you?
an if,
would
by the
you
way.
vote?
This is an if.
I'm gonna ask it. I'm gonna keep asking
Dude,
until you answer
okay,
directly.
bro, can I ask you one back? Can I?
Well,
I wanna ensure that we're
I'm not gonna
intellectually-
answer any question until you
Okay,
answer
bro.
mine. You're gonna answer specifically.
Dude,
You're
I
gonna
just
answer
answered it.
it.
I literally gave you a yes.
I
dude.
understand. Answer it directly. Right? I understand that
Okay,
you're
I
trying to
said
do
yes.
it in a
I
trying
said-
to do it in a long-winded way so that it doesn't sound as bad in your head.
No,
Answer
not
the
lo-
question
no,
directly.
dude. I said, I believe that there was a nuclear threat that could kill everybody. So yes, even if he's a bad person, which I admit he is, and I
No,
literally
even if
hate-
he's children with Jeffrey Epstein, you'd still vote for him. Even if he's a you'd still vote for him.
if you believe that it had a higher chance of
Name
stopping
one thing
extinction-
Donald Trump could do
extinction of
that would
Americans.
get.
Hold
Wait,
on,
name
dude,
one thing
I
Donald
already
Trump
gave you-
could do that would get you
Bro,
to
I
stop
gave you
supporting
10
him.
yeses. Dude, I don't support bro for the sake of supporting bro. I would not vote for him in
Yes, you do.
2028 had the if dude, what? What's
Do you
going
have
on,
a
man?
good wait? Do you have good enough reason to believe that there's such an increased nuclear threat to support Donald Trump? Do you even
Yes,
have a good
bro.
enough? No, you don't. We just had this
Well,
conversation.
dude, I would love to explain it to you.
I'm saying it for how it is. You gave no basis for why Kamala Harris was an increased nuclear threat. None.
Okay, man. Thank you, but I'll string it together for you. All right, and let me know if it's too long. I'd be happy to shorten it even more. All right. The argument for me is this: there is a higher risk of nuclear miscalculation, not just nuclear war in a general sense, but nuclear miscalculation, because there are systems in place that exacerbate the likelihood of
I've heard this.
accidental attacks. That's number one.
I've heard
all
this.
right?
I've already
Number
responded
two,
to this. Biden already agreed before Trump was even in office to not use AI in nuclear
okay,
armament.
And then it got ugly, right? And then Trump got in office, and things got prettier because Trump went to China and then tried to de-escalate.
So
and tried to make
there's no greater risk at all of nuclear warfare, correct?
What do you mean? My whole argument is that there is a greater risk of nuclear
No,
warfare.
there's not.
The first
Because we just
premise
demonstrated that there's not. Because
calculation
we just demonstrated that there's not. Because Biden already agreed before Trump was in office that AI should not be the ones controlling our nuclear armament.
agreements are different than an implementation, right? An agreement to agree is different than an implementation, and the nature of the agreement hadn't been solidified.
No,
in
but
the
it
law
indicates that they're
until-
doing the same thing anyway. So the idea that there's a
Dude,
greater
bro,
likelihood of nuclear risk
you never-
in terms
okay,
of a threat
have you never-
is ridiculous because
Dude,
this is
okay.
true, given that is the case that they disagreed with it.
Okay,
That
have
is a
you never
horrible
seen
basis.
an agreement? Have you never seen a complex agreement in geopolitical negotiation fall out? Have you never seen one after the agreement, after the exact same nature of the Joe Biden?
I'm not disputing that it could have. What I'm saying is that it
did.
is the
It did.
please listen.
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
I'm not
I'm
saying
happy to. Please.
I'm not saying it couldn't have. I'm saying it specifically is the case. You have no good reason to believe that would have happened, given it is the case that they have the same intentionality in terms of not allowing AI to have control over nuclear armament.
Okay. Whether we look at Putin calling the United States the enemy of Russia, or whatever it might have, explicitly been in words, or Xi Jinping releasing statements about our nation having like an opposition to the aim and the end and the telos of their nation, right? Whether we put if we put all of that to the side, which happened subsequent, by the way, to this agreement, right? I think the question now is, what is the nature of the tension between the United States and Russia after this agreement was set to be in place or set to be implemented, right? We were in a worse position, I guess, after that agreement or that sort of intent had been, posited, and well before it actually had been implemented. And my argument is that we had, in deciding between Kamala and deciding between, Trump, a higher chance of making it play out so that we can just solidify that as one of the threats that we get out of the way. And by the way, the AI threat is not the only threat for nuclear deterrence. There are, of course, indirect, sort of direct, I guess, MAD arguments for why the irrationality of Trump solidifies our position, especially in an area that's as tense as this, much better than Kamala would have psychologically. And I'm not going to get into the psychoanalysis of Kamala. Like, I don't think either of us want to hear that right now, and I don't think either of us need to hear that. But the point for me is, at the end of the day, there is much better of a track record to deal with a much more fragile situation in a way that you say, sure, it can't be proved, with a capital P, to not have played out in the worst possible way should the other candidate have been there. But I'm saying it's a risk that we can't afford to take.
I know you keep saying the same thing over and over again. I've responded to this multiple times. There's still no bait. You that entire time gave no evidence. That whole time, it was words with no evidence.
Okay. Psychologically, disagreeable individuals have a much higher propensity.
Wait, are you saying that Kamala Harris is more likely to be disagreeable?
She's way more likely to be agreeable. She's way more likely to be agreeable, which is why we're disadvantaged in a nuclear conflict.
What makes you think that she's more likely to be agreeable?
Because Trump is the 99th percentile of disagreeability on the spectrum, and independent of whether we can get his psychological big five results, we can definitely see that his conflict resolution methods in the past have been, of course, unorthodox.
Wait, in which way was Kamala Harris agreeable, and in which way was Donald Trump disagreeable that makes it better in terms of the conditions on a worldwide basis for there being less conflict?
The, I guess, inference I've made that Kamala would be less disagreeable than Trump, I didn't think that was a radical inference, right? But I guess at the end of the day, the question is, how would Trump have reacted? And would that have sufficed to give us good enough evidence based on his track record in history, in an especially tense time, right? That we would feel more safe than gambling on somebody who we can at least
Who's more agreeable with Putin?
Who's more agreeable? Well, the agreeability with Putin is different than the agreeability with Xi Jinping and the agreeability with...
Okay, so then what the f*** are you saying?
For good reasons.
What the f*** is this guy saying?
Okay,
you can't just make a generalized claim like that and then I provide specific examples like Putin. You're like, oh, the exact example I just gave in terms of how he's better, he's actually not better because of that. Even though Kamala Harris should be better than that certain institute. Stop talking. Even though Kamala Harris should be better than that certain institute based and that's
the Russian nuclear threat's not the one I was talking about, bro. If it were the Russian nuclear threat I was talking about.
Yeah, so
come on. Really, dude. Okay, I'll mute myself, bro. You got it, bro.
Yeah. I mean, you were cutting me off, right?
Okay, man. Go ahead. Feel free. Dude, dead ass. I'm trying to have a conversation with you, man. Like, I feel like I'm about to get booted, but I sincerely, wholly, unequivocally want to actually hear your thoughts, bro. Like, I've been thinking about this, and I've been thinking about people who have opinions that differ, and I've been thinking about all this sort of stuff. And I really hope that, it comes off sincerely because that's how I mean it. Go ahead.
You got to actually engage with the points I'm making, though. Like, you can't just, come into the live and just because you say things in a patient and calm way mean that, you're going to be responded to in a positive way. You've got to actually legitimately, intellectually engage with what I have to say. And if you just spew bull on my live stream and you don't say anything specific in response to what I'm saying and you don't clarify your position, I'm going to call it out. Because that's also another way, specifically, how you can not be clear, and we could not have a clear conversation and actually be able to demonstrate anything legitimate from this conversation in terms of what we've learned or what we've actually been able to disagree upon in a meaningful way, insofar as that we can understand each other's position more. Your position isn't understood because there's no basis to it. There's no factual basis. It's simply just because you felt like it. And we've gone through the reasoning. You said specifically because of the fact that Donald Trump was more disagreeable But then I asked him, is he more disagreeable in the context of Putin? And then it's not true in that circumstance. Then you have to clarify specifically what you mean in terms of Putin. But Putin, isn't that the biggest risk for a nuclear fight that you were bringing up?
China is what I was specifying with regard to the disagreeability.
You think we're at a
element.
high likely? Wait, the trade war puts us at a less likelihood of there being conflict between us and China?
In 2024, the miscalculation risk seemed to have been in a little bit of a different situation than it is, I guess, historically, right? Russia had been, of course, in a tense position with us, right? But Trump's, whole track record, whether, it's developed through his business prowess or whether it's developed through other contexts, right, has been effective, through disagreeability as an independent or not, across the board to, I guess, be able to adapt in these circumstances against different parties to be able to bring tensions down. At the end of the day, the important thing for me is that the tension against the United States and the likelihood of us getting nuked, again, is lower. And whether he's disagreeable with party A and not with party B shouldn't be the determining factor.
Can you give me one specific action Trump has engaged in that has reduced global tensions that the Biden-Harris administration would not have engaged in?
Threatening China over Twitter. Dude, I'm dead serious, bro. Like, I'm saying, like, this is ridiculous. It's absurd. Everybody was like, what the hell is going on?
Wouldn't threatening China increase conflict?
Well, the thing is that we should ask ourselves, why did it decrease conflict? Right? Why did threatening North Korea stop the nuclear war, bro?
It didn't. We weren't having a nuclear war with North Korea. Secondly,
North Korea
they kept testing
right,
missiles. They kept testing missiles right after Trump, because right after Trump talked to Kim Jong-un, because Trump called him Rocket Man again.
Okay. Well, I think the beginning of the testing missiles was after the was it the movie, The Interview, or something along those lines, right? Once he had said, "Hey, we're gonna, nuke you 10 times harder than XYZ," whatever it was, right? That's when we saw the most prominent response, and that's when we saw the I guess highest level of submissiveness in response to Trump's assertion, right? I think that's like a very clear, prominent example, and something that other leaders just wouldn't have done.
You think that if Kamala Harris threatened China more on Twitter, that you would think that she's a better candidate?
I would think that she is, I guess, more. Well, I mean, okay, that's just one, I guess, example. If she were in the position where she had a track record of dealing with these leaders and she had done the same sorts of things as Trump, I mean, I would absolutely take her on her merits and see the other ways that we could go about it. Like, literally, for me, dude, it's just minimizing the likelihood of getting nuked when nuke tensions are high. That's it.
Can you give me an example of one specific threat Trump engaged in against China that you think was better, that Kamala Harris wouldn't have engaged in?
I mean, off the top of my head, I don't have his tweets or anything along those lines, right? But yeah, I mean, I anybody can look up. I mean, feel free to look up. Sorry, I didn't come prepared with that, but I'm sure, like the exact wording of his threat is something you can find. But over Twitter, propelling threats toward China, saying essentially like, sit down, like back down. Should we need to I guess attack in a big way? Vaguely, we will. That's essentially like a vague enough, but
Do you not realize both administrations that's true? That there would be a response if they attack us? And I just want to let you know, there is no threat of them attacking us. There's no threat of nuclear war with China. There's mutually assured destruction. Do you know what that is? It means when two countries both have access to nuclear weapons, it is the case that they do not have any incentive to drop a nuke on the other country, because it is the case that their country themselves will get nuked, and everything they care about, they will not have power over anymore. So they have an ultimate incentive to not nuke other countries because it will lead to the destruction of their own.
So the inductive infallibility of mutually assured destruction is the fact that nobody has nuked the other country yet, right? It's the, I guess, like assurance that we have is just that we haven't yet nuked one another.
Name one country in history that has had nuclear weapons that nuked another country that had nuclear weapons.
So we've had a century developing nuclear weapons. Up until the past decade or so, we haven't had the level of
name one country in which had nuclear weapons that nuked a country that had nuclear weapons.
My point is the time frame is way too short for that to be a
name one country that had nuclear weapons that nuked a country that also had nuclear weapons.
My point was that there are no countries, but there is no time frame that's relevant for that, bro. Dude,
so you have no countries. Not a single country can you mention.
Dude, miscalculation is an entirely different scenario. It's not like I pressed
You
the
have
big red
no
button.
evidence that this is going to happen. You have no evidence that
Bro,
it's more
look
likely.
up
You have
lethal
no
atomic
basis in
weapons.
reasoning for saying that we're more likely to go to war with China, given it is, or go to war, nuclear war with China, given that the Democrats are in office. When Donald Trump, you're saying him threatening them is reducing the likelihood of nuclear tension, and him specifically advocating for tariffs, right, is specifically going to lead to there being less conflict between us and China. It's laughable that you think that us threatening them with tariffs and with direct threats otherwise, right, you think is somehow going to reduce the likelihood that we have conflict with them. If anything, it would increase the likelihood of there being conflict.